Breaking news: as the third largest bank in America, Wells Fargo announces additional mass layoffs starting today, September 23rd. Now, interestingly enough, those layoffs from Wells Fargo may be a direct result of John Deere closing multiple facilities and doing their own set of mass layoffs as well, which may be a result of the farmers in the area and meat packaging facilities having their own round of mass layoffs. What impact will these closures have on localized communities? And I'll bring up Google Maps to show you just how massive these facilities are. And then we're also going to ask probably the most important question of all, which is why is this happening? So you guys are going to get a great video today full of overwhelming value. And before I begin and get started, Mitch Vexler, sir, happy Monday. How are you, sir?
Good. These days are just dragging one to another. Sometimes it's hard to tell exactly where we are, but it's been.
I forgot it was.
Yeah.
I forgot it was Monday, Mitch. That's shame on me, man. I can't believe it. I had to stop for a second. Like, wait a minute, is today Monday? It has been nonstop work, nonstop emails, nonstop lawsuits that we're getting, people coming forward, various fraud. People are trying to come together to stop what's happening. So a lot of great things, man. I'm going to get started right now, Mitch, on what's going on with Wells Fargo exactly. Then I'm going to come back to you to get your insights. Wells Fargo, just depending on the data source, is the third largest bank in America. Take a look here. First of all, you see September 23rd, their stock is down about 2%, Wells Fargo. But really what I wanted you guys to pay attention to is this is a massive employer. They have 226,000 employees right now. So it's important to know what's going on with huge, giant companies like this, because that's a lot of people. Now, when we go under the hood, here's what I want to show you guys. And trust me, I'm going to go deeply under the hood and I'm going to show you guys a lot more than what this article is saying. Wells Fargo announces plans to lay off nearly 80 employees. This notice indicates layoffs will happen in waves beginning on Monday, September 23rd, which is today. Layoffs will happen in waves again beginning September 23rd. Here's the breakdown of layoffs. And what's interesting, Mitch, is when I added this together and I did the math for myself, it's actually a lot more than what they're saying. But here's the start of it right here, September 23rd, and all the way till November 18th. A total of 78 people will be laid off in November. And again, I'm going to show you that Wells Fargo is actually laying off a lot more people than what this says. The Iowa Warn Log shows the layoffs are the result of addendums to previous layoffs in order to include more employees, so it wasn't enough. Now, I was interested to see what Wells Fargo had to say about why they're doing these layoffs, and they gave us pretty much nothing. Take a listen, Mitch. We regularly review and adjust staffing levels to align with market conditions and the needs of our businesses. And I highlighted market conditions because it's probably the layoffs. They're probably doing their own layoffs because multiple businesses are doing layoffs in the exact area that they do business in. We work very hard to identify opportunities for employees in other parts of the company so we can retain as many employees as possible. Where it's not possible, we provide assistance such as severance and career counseling. All the jobs being eliminated are at Wells Fargo Jordan Creek campus. And again, this is false. They are actually nationwide, and I'll show you that here in a minute. And again, it goes on to say Wells Fargo layoffs, latest in a long series of reductions. The latest announcement of layoffs bring the total Wells Fargo workforce reduction in the metro area to 285 so far in 2024. But also since April of 2022, it's been 949. And again, this is the local area. When I pull up Google Maps, Mitch, just to give you and the viewers an idea of how massive this facility is, I mean, look at this sucker. This is the Wells Fargo facility. I'm not taking you to the other facilities yet, but this is huge, huge facility. When I zoom out here, I want to show you and the viewers, look at all of the residential neighborhoods around here. There's a huge section, residential neighborhood here, residential neighborhood here. Looks like all over here as well, pretty much surrounded by residential neighborhoods, plus commercial properties. Look at this. This is Jordan Creek Town Center. Certainly that town center is going to suffer, and anyone that has businesses in there from these layoffs. You have the Dollar Tree, you have Subway, you have all kinds of stuff. This is a massive facility. This is kind of the front. And let me just take you guys down here, and I'm going to show you guys just how big this property is, because there's probably going to be a lot more layoffs. So let me just drive down the street and look at to the right. You know, there's these massive parking lots right here. Looks like apartments over there as well. I mean, this thing wraps all the way around. Look at this. I mean, huge parking lots. Look at that. They even have a parking garage. So regardless, the point I'm trying to make, Mitch, and we'll go into our second segment to show how this spreads by using math and the data, but can you explain to the viewers how these layoffs and closures of facilities impact the dynamics of localized community? In other words, the job market, my friend, the job market is vital to all communities. Can you explain that, sir?
Well, single family homes and multifamily obviously determine where they're going to be built based on the closest employment center. So that Wells Fargo that you just showed actually looks very similar to the Wells Fargo facility in Las Vegas, and it's the exact same thing. So whatever those employees are and what they're getting paid, if you lay off, let's just say 5% of 1,000 employee workforce, well, that's 50 people. But the problem with that, even small as that may sound, that's an awful lot of people that are dependent. That's 50 families that are dependent. Then when they go shopping, other facilities, mom and pop facilities, are dependent, i.e. clothing stores, et cetera, et cetera. So the chain is completely connected. And when things start to go bad, regardless of where it is, it could be Canada, it can be anywhere. When things start to go bad, it can be a farming community. The ramifications go all the way through an economic cycle and an economic geographic vicinity. And that's why where I come from, every 2 years, like a yo-yo, it goes up and down, but that's just one city in Windsor, but Detroit is a similar thing. In Illinois, where they have other plants, a similar thing. So if you've got plants, and you can even look at it and say, technically, that Wells Fargo facility, even though it's a bank office building, it's a plant. When those plants get sick, it works its way all the way through, up and down the economic chain.
Yeah, I mean, and the layoff spread. I'm going to move on now to the segment where I want to show the viewers that it is spreading, that these layoffs is actually a chain reaction of other layoffs. And we don't have to guess that because I actually accessed all of the layoff information and I looked at Polk County just to show you that this stuff does spread. And it's nasty. Everything in yellow here are Wells Fargo layoffs. So again, all of these are layoffs that they announced. The total amount, you guys see all in Polk County right here, central Iowa, the total amount of layoffs are actually 300. So there's roughly 300, but that's just in that area. When I actually look at Wells Fargo as a company, I see that there's actually a lot more layoffs going on with Wells Fargo across the nation. They have 95 layoffs in Hillsborough, 74 layoffs in Jacksonville, 130 recent mass layoffs in Las Vegas, 254 layoffs in Columbia, and 80 layoffs in Denver. So what I'm also saying is Wells Fargo's not giving us all of the info. Now, I highlighted in red all of the other companies in Iowa, Polk County, that have done their own set of layoffs. Look at that. So everything in red are separate companies outside of Wells Fargo that have filed with the state of Iowa that they too are starting mass layoffs. And when I went down this list, Mitch, this was really surprising to me. First of all, John Deere, I'm like, oh my gosh, John Deere is, pretty close to this Wells Fargo facility. And then when I look at what employers had the biggest layoffs, it was Smithfield Packaging Meats and Missouri Prime Beef Packers. So it has to do with farming and it has to do with agriculture and things like that. So I'm wondering, did those layoffs result in John Deere's layoffs, which resulted in Wells Fargo's layoffs? Take a look at this article. Frustrations grow over John Deere layoffs, moving jobs to Mexico. We could do an entire video on that alone, but I just want to do a few paragraphs here. Earlier this summer, John Deere said it was laying off more than 600 employees, and get this, guys, at 3 production plants in Illinois and Iowa, as well as unannounced number of salaried employees at its corporate level. The company also said it plans to move the manufacturing or skid steer loaders and compact truck loaders from its Iowa facility to Mexico by the end of 2026. And that is horrible. You do not want to hear that. And also what this is saying is they had massive amounts of profit. And in spite of that, they're still doing layoffs. This is a response from their company at John Deere. There are challenges in the AG economy, but John Deere has been effective in making a profit for its shareholders. Take a look at how big these facilities are. And I have to zoom out here. Look at this. I mean, this again is very close to the Wells Fargo facilities and layoffs, but these are huge facilities, Mitch. Look at this. This one over here. Let me zoom in here. They got multiple facilities here, again, surrounded by what? Single family homes. And this is in a nice area. Look at that. Look at all of these houses. So not only do they have all these houses, they also have, these restaurants, Burger Kings, all of that stuff. And that's just one area. When I scroll down to these down here, not as densely concentrated as those last facilities, but look at all of these commercial properties right here that are probably leaning heavily on those 3 facilities right here. But when we go north, you can see here's where all the residences are. And it's not just John Deere. I'm wondering again, did John Deere have to do the layoffs because of companies like this, Missouri Prime Beef Packers? You see here that they have laid off and shut down their facility. They've laid off 335 employees. And in addition to that, right here, 319 workers out of jobs at the Altima Smithfield plant, which is again right down the way from Wells Fargo. The company announced this summer that the ham boning facility would close and 314 workers would be laid off. And when we look at Smithfield right here, look at the facility. Again, huge facility. When I zoom out, in other words, guys, when they close these facilities, it's definitely painful. Look at this, an entire community right here, entire community. And then above that, you have all of this commercial right here. So look at that. You got an Amazon facility. You got actually multiple Amazon facilities. But look at this. I mean, this is not small, Mitch. This is a huge. Mitch, having showed you that, having showed you the data, what's happening underneath the hood, do you think it's possible that Wells Fargo has done their own multiple rounds of mass layoffs as a result of what's going on with John Deere and those other farm and meat packaging facilities?
Indirectly, yes. Are they smart enough to figure it out up front? Probably not. There's a reason why Warren Buffett has been jettisoning bank stocks. And it does tie into everything that we've been saying, in that if mom and pop can't afford the taxes, they've got a problem. And because that affects supply and demand, right? Demand drops. So it works its way all the way through the economic chain. But over and above all that, against the supply and demand and Warren Buffett dropping, businesses will go where businesses are welcome. And if the red carpet has been opened up for John Deere in Mexico, as a shareholder of John Deere, they don't have much of a choice but to accept the red carpet, whether you like it or not. I disagree with it, obviously. I prefer it to stay in the United States, and there are things that can be done. However, this does tie 100% to what I have been saying on the real estate taxes. Put every company on an even, fair playing field by eliminating the property taxes, because then they don't have a reason to leave but for the actual cost of employment. But the cost of employment drops when mom and pop don't have to be paying real estate tax. It needs to go to a uniform state's sales tax so that the playing field for everybody, that's mom and pop at the home level, that's the businesses at the corporate level, so that the playing field is economically fair. And it puts the balance sheet back into everybody's position, rather than force feeding the government the ability to commit additional fraud.
And it's really, really sad to see that these American companies are being pushed out and forced out and giving another country the jobs that Americans could have. And, I think that we really got to focus and talk now about why, Mitch. Like, why is this happening? Is it entirely because of corporate CEO greed? Or maybe it's actually the Federal Reserve, because as you were articulating, the property taxes. If property taxes weren't so, all properties, by the way, weren't so overvalued, then we wouldn't need as many layoffs as we're having. And Mitch, you actually put together some math on just how bad property taxes are when it comes to a few things like getting a haircut and getting a gallon of milk. Take a look. What Mitch did is he's showing you guys how many meals a restaurant has to sell to pay for the property taxes, or how many pairs and outfits a clothing store would have to sell, or a nail salon. And he's also showing you guys that as far as getting milk, milk from a cow to the store, getting a gallon of milk has 8 layers minimum, 8 layers of property tax, guys. Again, a gallon of milk has 8 layers of property tax: the farmland, the buildings to harvest, the buildings to store, the buildings to transport, lab testing, processing, packaging, selling at the grocery stores. It all has to do with property tax. And look on the top here, okay? Let's just look at the first restaurant. This first restaurant is basically saying that in 1 year, it has to sell 292 meals to pay for the taxes. Mitch is also showing you what happens when you step up and you protest the value and you stop the jurisdictions from taxing you to death. This restaurant went from needing to sell 292 meals to cover property tax to only 102. And look at haircuts, just to put this in perspective, guys, 73 haircuts to pay for property tax. If they protest, it only takes 26 haircuts to pay for property tax. The property taxes are completely out of control. Now, when we ask why are property taxes so out of control? One big reason is the overwhelming amount of debt and toxic spending that our governments do on the federal level, but also on the state level. What you guys see here is the federal parabolic debt chart, meaning they are not paying off debt. They are just stacking debt on top of debt on top of debt, and they're never even planning any ways to strategically pay this off. And then therefore, these jurisdictions and municipalities, here's another chart that's parabolic. These jurisdictions and municipalities must tax us to death or they're bankrupt. In other words, the fraud is holding the entire system together. And Mitch also did this breakdown. If we were to compare credit card debt, so if we were to take all of the government debt plus unfunded liabilities, divide that in by the taxpayers, essentially, you guys, we have a credit card that has $1.13 million. That's a balance. And that's not even our debt. That's the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve has handed each and every one of us a $1.13 million debt. That is 560 times greater than a consumer credit card of $2,000. So if it wasn't for the Federal Reserve pushing these companies out of state or even out of country and taxing them to death, we wouldn't have as many layoffs. We wouldn't need to pay for as much debt as we're in. And the other thing, consumers are strapped. Bankruptcies are going up. We're losing our jobs. Mitch, can you break down what's happening and how all of this ties together?
The federal debt is parabolic. The local debt, comprised of municipalities and school bonds, is parabolic, to the point that both those charts you can be superimposed on top of each other. It's the exact same chart. And there is no math that will allow this to be paid back. So that 1,139,000 that you saw was simply based on the amount of houses in the United States. So it's the total debt, that 163 trillion divided by the amount of houses. Well, every homeowner owes 1,139,000, give or take, dollars. And I'm quite certain that every single homeowner out there would say, screw you, we're not paying it. There is a theory at some point that's what's going to happen. If you have enough people that stand up in mass and say, that's it, we're going to do what the unions do, we're going on strike, within hours, the entire system would collapse, right? Because there's no way the amount of interest that's being done on the clock is by the second. This is ticking, this is compounding. So there's a huge problem there. And even because I did run that math as well, and I said, okay, fine. If we wanted to reduce the federal debt by 2 trillion, that would require 51 trillion in gross domestic product. That doesn't exist. We're at 25 trillion, give or take. You literally in 1 year immediately would have to double to 51 trillion just to contemplate the idea of reducing this problem by 2 trillion. So even if you said it's 2 trillion and it's still compounding, okay, great. That's a 50-year payoff, conditional upon going immediately to 51 trillion, which cannot be done. It's bankrupt. So again, coming back to Buffett, and you look at all this, well, he's jettisoning the banks for the exact same reason. Where's the money going to come from? Right? The banks, they reach their zenith. It's over. The school districts, in terms of the debt load that they put on by the bonds, have reached their zenith. It's over. They can't be paid back. And anybody that says they are, okay, they can, fine, perfect. Give me the math. Show me, because we can't find it.
You know, Mitch, it seems like they just completely stopped caring. Like they were, they're like, you know what, we can't pay this off anyway, so let's just add on to it until it breaks somehow. I mean, they just stopped caring. So do you think, though, that the layoffs, we would have less layoffs if it wasn't for that overwhelming debt? If we didn't have that debt, would it even be necessary for quantitative tightening and for all of these rounds of mass layoffs? In other words, is this the fault of the Federal Reserve?
A good portion of this at the federal level If you want to assign blame, yeah, you can go about 70% to the Federal Reserve. But as I've said, the Federal Reserve should never have existed from the word go. It has been a failed construct because it only existed for the benefit of the banks, not the benefit of the economy. It was there to backstop what in essence was bank runs. And that's what they've been doing ever since, including lying to everybody. So the problem is, yeah, the Federal Reserve is to blame, but on a local level, you have the exact same nonsense of what I call economic ignorance. These people that sit on these school boards are economic ignorance. The mayor that I made a comment on the other day, same thing when she says, well, real estate taxes are going up 30%. There's no math to justify that. That's a violation of USPAP. It's a violation of their state property tax code. It's a violation of their state constitution. And you're right, they don't give a damn. Well, if you're going to go bankrupt, why not party on the way out? The problem is the partying on the way out is costing even more money. Yeah. So they're going to push this to the point where it simply breaks. And all we're trying to say is there is a possible workout solution to all of this. Best you pay attention before the market does what it's going to do.
Mitch, just to put this in perspective, when a county, like Polk County loses the tax revenue off of these facilities that are closing down, don't they then have to pass that liability on to the homeowners? Like if they're not receiving, say, another $1 million in property taxes because of those facilities closing, won't they then have to redo their budget to pass that directly onto homeowners to continue to fund the municipalities like the school districts, police departments, EMTs, and things like that?
Well, if somebody can explain to me how you're going to get blood out of a stone, I'd love to know the answer to that. I'd love to see the proof. And coincidentally, that was part of the same conversation I had with a very nice guy over at the BRB, which is a Texas bond entity that researches a portion of the bonds. And he even said, well, if there's fewer taxpayers, then that amount of money would be put on the back of the remaining taxpayers. Okay, show me the math. And the answer is you can't. Nobody can.
It's crazy, Mitch, because we're painting the picture where this debt is coming from, right? The Federal Reserve, it's coming from the states. And at the end of the day, we always have mom and pop economic engine. We always seem to have to pay for it. If there's layoffs 10 miles from my house, I have to pay for that. That means the county that I'm in, they can't operate the same way anymore. And the fraud just continues, meaning when I say the fraud just continues, meaning these municipalities can't get less money. They not only can't get less money, and they not only can't get the same amount of money, they have to get more money. And when I see that in my own, Harris County ISD is asking for $4.4 billion in bonds for just this next year. And that's the biggest in history. So it is falling apart. You're not wrong. Now, are we going to start seeing more layoffs in the future, Mitch?
Yes, you'll end up, if they don't do what is necessary to be done, as far as our math is showing, you're going to end up in a greater depression with about 35% unemployment. So you can figure that some of these banks, they're going to drop their staffs 60, 70%. That's where it's headed. I mean, and like I said, businesses will go where they're welcome. Where there's an economic opportunity, they will go. And this is a big problem. It's a circular issue straight into hell. And it has to be avoided, even though avoiding it is painful. It's a hell of a lot less painful than literally saying, okay, that's it. The whole system is bankrupt. We're going to have to start over. This is going to be a big problem if they don't get on board and fix it real quick.
Yeah. I mean, what does 35% unemployment look like?
The Great Depression had 25% unemployment. There were still businesses, there were still things happening. But the point of the matter is, if you're part of that 25 or 35%, that's ungodly painful because there's no revenue coming in. And that's what started this nonsense in the first place during the Great Depression. Well, we're going to create the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve hasn't gotten anything right since the day it opened, since the day it was created. Nothing. They shouldn't exist because they've been monkeying around with the natural course of business. The real estate taxes, you're now seeing the ramifications of monkeying around and stealing people's money. You can't pay this back. There's no math on this planet that could show somebody how to pay down 163 trillion. And by the way, there is documents out there that says it's up to 250 trillion. Okay, It doesn't matter because it isn't getting paid back anyway.
Well, it's going to be paid back in the form of our bankruptcies and tax delinquencies and us ruining our lives. And then finally, the Fed's going to come in and stimulate. And the stimulation is just going to lead to a bigger gap, wealth gap. And
they can't.
Just around and around it goes, Mitch. You know, when's the empire going to collapse? I mean, the keystones that are being taken out of the pillars are everywhere. I mean, this is going to be a doom loop. I couldn't even imagine 35%. 35% is bad. But here's how I want to end, okay? If you're freaked out, don't freak out. You still have time to plan ahead, rebudget, cancel your subscriptions. Don't go out to eat, buy a whole bunch of beans and rice and spaghetti or whatever you got to do to rebudget so that you can see what's coming. And that's the hard thing, guys, is not seeing it coming, right? You don't want to get blindsided specifically by job loss, okay? The debt, I know, is blindsiding. The overvaluation that Mitch and I are talking about, blindsiding. But you don't have to be blindsided for turmoil coming. You can do things about that. And a huge thing is saving. And another huge thing is if you are worried about your job, start sending your resume out. I'm not a financial advisor, but start sending your resume out and see what's out there available, because you don't want to start sending that resume out when everyone just got laid off. You want to do that right now when there's still jobs available. So that's where I want to end. Happy Monday again, you guys. Mitch, anything you want to say before I let you, before we go, brother?
No, I really think that Travis just hit the nail on the head. You do what it is that you can do within your own sphere. And if that means taking the real estate course so that you can go and protest, that's within your sphere. And by the way, the rate of return or the return on investment is astronomical. If you can save yourself $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a year, well, over 5 years, that's $20,000, $25,000, $30,000. That's a pretty good chunk of money. Will the system collapse prior to that? Nobody knows. Nobody knows the truth. But the reality is, we do know that what we're talking about is quantifiable. We're pushing the buttons, and we're getting a lot of people from across the United States supply us with an awful lot of evidence.
I'm going to end this a little bit differently. Let me show them just real quick some of the evidence. We got this from a viewer. This is from Anchorage, Alaska. This is Dave Bronson, all right, the mayor, saying that taxes have increased, assessment have increased by 9.2% for single family homes, 9.4% for condominiums. And look at what this guy's saying, guys. This is good news for residents. This guy is literally saying, he's telling taxpayers, hey, I'm going to charge you, we're going to go up at 9.2%. But don't worry, that's good news. I mean, Mitch, these politicians, these CADs, these state comptrollers, man, we need work. And if people are like, oh, what do you do? What do you do? What are we going to replace it with? Well, let's just first stop the fraud. Let's just first have them become transparent so we can kind of see how bad the fraud is. Maybe we start there. You know, we don't have to be like Mitch and conquer the whole world. We can win our battles on a localized level by understanding how to protest property taxes. And it's not just homeowners, you guys. Business owners, the same thing. And if those business owners can save money on taxes, odds are eventually and hopefully that savings will be passed on to you and your community. Just think about what we're saying, guys. Step up. Everything is for free that we're doing. Everything is in the description, are in the links. Step 1, sign the petition, join the movement. Step 2, take the course and learn how to fight. Now, other than that, guys, have a great Monday. And if you're out there investing in real estate, or if you're out there just living your life, we wish you luck and we hope you win.